Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're continuing our emotional what-if story. What if Hinata became the light in Sasuke's darkest days? Their unexpected bond changed everything. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss future episodes. If you're enjoying this story, comment below. Hinata will save Sasuke. Now sit back, relax, and discover what happens next as their unexpected bond begins changing Sasuke's destiny. Let's begin. Part 2. Sasuke was overlooking one of Konoha's busiest streets. He was perched on a high roof and was as still as a painting. The sun was setting and about to fully hide its brightness behind the high mountains south of Konoha. His eyes moved around the street. He saw tired villagers that were dragging themselves to their homes after a long day of work. He saw how they talked and laughed with their friends. He saw young children who were rushing to get home in time so as not to arouse their parents' anger for playing on the streets until it was dark. They looked so naive, happy and full of hope. Some would grow up to be powerful shinobi or respected men and women of power and influence in other professions. He heard the calls of the street vendors. They were pouring every last bit of their energy into attracting customers before calling it a day. He saw young lovers hand in hand, whispering to each other and adoring one another. All these sights made him feel like the filthiest piece of trash this side of Fire Country. It was in moments like these when he truly felt ashamed of being Sasuke Uchiha. Guilt sat on his shoulders like a massive boulder on a bed of roses. The guilt he felt was so profound and so acute that he felt as if it was eating him alive, as if its sharp powerful teeth were ripping through his insides the same way a tiger tore through its captured prey. He had wanted to destroy Konoha. The discovery that the Konoha administration had orchestrated the massacre of his clan combined with his madness had resulted in him almost drooling at the thought of its demise. He had wanted to see Konoha burn. He had wanted its ashes to be swept away by the wind so that it would be nothing but a memory. It was a horrible desire, but it had seemed so right in the midst of all the madness. He had been so drunk with madness that he had seen no other alternative. He now knew that he had been so lost. It was senseless to punish an entire village for the sins of a handful of people. The people of Konoha did not deserve to suffer for sins they were not even aware of. These children, these young optimistic children, did not have to die because of Hiruzen and his accomplices. Konoha was not Hiruzen Sarutobi nor was Konoha Danzo Shimura. The guilt of his twisted past actions and desires followed him day and night. He sometimes thought of leaving it all behind. He sometimes felt like running away from Konoha. Disappearing and never looking back. Deep down he knew it was futile. His guilt would follow him wherever he went. Insanity was a dark place. He remembered what it felt like waking up in the morning and feeling as if he was losing control of his mind. He knew how it felt to start reasoning in a way that went against his values. He knew what it felt like when the line between reality and imagination started blurring and the confusion of not knowing the difference started settling in. He remembered the time when he had imagined himself rolling in Itachi's blood. He recalled the time when he had thought it was crucial for him to kill anyone that vaguely resembled Itachi. His mind drifted to an incident before Itachi's death. He had been so confused about whether or not he had killed Itachi for almost an entire day. He had previously had no idea where the madness had originated from. It was after months of doing nothing but being alone with his thoughts that he had found the answer. His obsession was to blame. Obsession caused madness. He had a better understanding of Orochimaru than most. The snake was also a victim of insanity. No sane person would do the gruesome things he did. It had been his obsession with immorality that had led him to become so deranged. Gaara of the desert was another example of the insanity that resulted from obsession. His insanity had originated from his obsession to find meaning in his existence. His obsession had resulted in him becoming a psychopath that butchered people in order to validate his existence. He understood why Gaara did what he did. Experiencing it for himself made him understand. He understood why Orochimaru had performed all those sickening experiments on people and did all those vile things to his own body. Despite understanding why they did what they did, he held no sympathy for them. He held no sympathy for himself either. All three of them were a product of themselves. They were their own victims. So the fact that he had been insane at the time did not lessen the guilt that weighed on him. Worst of all, wanting to destroy Konoha was not his only source of guilt. Guilt weighed so heavily on his shoulders that it was a wonder he could still walk. So this guilt, this suffocating guilt that sometimes made him wish to close his eyes and never wake up, would stay with him until his dying day. So was he really to blame if he sometimes wished for his dying day to come sooner? Hinata watched Sasuke entering the bookshop at the corner of the winding street. It had been 2 days since she had seen him. 3 days since she had resolved to pull him out of the darkness. She was tired and she was hungry. She had neglected eating lunch with all the work that she had been engrossed in at the hospital. She felt a portion of her exhaustion leaving her system when she spotted Sasuke. Determination had taken its place. She had a goal to achieve. She needed to become close to Sasuke. Only then could she possibly have the tiniest bit of a chance of helping him find his way. The first thing she noticed when she entered the bookshop was the sound of the fan. It spun slowly from the ceiling in a monotonous beat. The smell of book paper was heavy in the air. It made her feel warm inside. She greeted the store owner by the counter. He had salt and pepper hair and a kind smile. There was a deep thirst for knowledge that shone brightly in his brown eyes. He was holding a book in his hand. He smiled in response to her greeting. She had a strong liking for the middle-aged store owner. He held interesting conversations and his book recommendations never failed to be of good taste. This bookstore was a place that was dear to her heart. She had discovered it almost 3 years ago. She had been smitten ever since. The bookstore was empty except for the owner, Sasuke and her. She made a sharp turn and headed in the direction opposite to where Sasuke was standing. She had only caught a glimpse of him when she had entered. She pretended not to notice him. She did not want him to get the impression that she was stalking him. He noticed her before she had fully entered the store. She looked the same as always. Well put together, modest and respectful. Like the type of girl traditional men would want to take home to their mothers. The wind carried the tiniest traces of her greeting towards the store owner over to his ears. She sounded the same as always, mellow, collected and polite. He wondered if she ever raised her voice. What game was Hinata Hyuga playing? They were just bumping into each too often these days. They had bumped into each other 6 whole times in the past 2 months alone. He believed in coincidences, but this was just too much for him to ignore. Something was at play here. He watched her as she walked down the aisle and ran her fingers along the novels on the opposite side of the store. She was purposefully ignoring him. It was impossible for her not to have noticed him considering that there were only 3 people in the room. She turned around and looked at him. She raised a pale hand and waved at him. He did not respond. She did not seem bothered by his unresponsiveness. She turned around and grabbed a book from the shelf and walked in his direction. His eyes were on her the entire time. She stopped a few feet away from him. He spoke before she had even opened her mouth. Does the Hyuga clan's precious little heiress not have anything better to do than to stalk me? Said Sasuke. Hinata's eyes opened wide in apprehension. She was speechless for a long moment before a mischievous spark ignited in her large lavender eyes. I'll have Sasuke-san know that I work at the hospital, whispered Hinata. He glanced up and down her form. So his formerly socially awkward classmate was as a medic. It made sense considering her gentle personality. But honestly, stalking Sasuke-san has become my favorite pastime. You might even call it my new obsession, she continued. He recalled an image of a young cripplingly meek Hinata hiding behind Kiba. It was next to impossible to reconcile the fact that she and the young woman before him were the same person. He smirked. People do change, don't they? The subject of stalkers took him back to a simpler and happier time. To the days where he had been stalked by a group of fangirls. He had no fangirls nowadays. His group of fangirls were a relic of the past. Stop stalking me. It's pathetic, said Sasuke. I'm sorry Sasuke-san, but that is not up to you to decide, Hinata said to him with a straight face. I, your stalker, set the terms of our relationship. Not you. He stared at her with a blank expression. She mirrored the same expression. You know what happened to the girls that used to stalk me? Said Sasuke. What? Answered Hinata. She was still mirroring his stony expression. I fed them to my snakes, he said. I'm not sure you're aware of this Sasuke-san, but Hyuga make for terrible food, said Hinata. And who told you this? Said Sasuke. The snakes, said Hinata. He raised his eyebrow. She cracked. A tiny smile appeared on her face and her cheeks reddened. She almost looked embarrassed. He smirked. People changed, but they never changed completely. She had a sense of humor. He had noticed the other day when they had a similar exchange about him eating puppies and babies. She was not as stiff as the typical Hyuga. His eyes shifted down to the books in her hands. He failed to read the title since her hands were obscuring his view. Similarly, her eyes drifted to the book in his hand. She held out one of the books she was holding. The book was gray and had an image of a tiny yellow bird perched on a leafless tree. The title was written in bold text. He read the title, A Lullaby for the Broken. A peace offering for stalking you, whispered Hinata. What is it about? He said. He was looking for new reading material anyway. Romance, whispered Hinata. Not in a million years, he said. He felt the store owner's eyes on him. The man had never heard him speak so much. He set his gaze on the store owner. The aging man tipped his head towards Hinata's direction, winked at him and went back to his book. The suggestion did not impress him. It's not as bad as Sasuke-san thinks, said Hinata. Life does not play out like a fairy tale, he said. Hinata brought the books towards herself and held close to her chest. She was looking at him with an expression he could not describe. He once again got the feeling that her eyes saw beneath flesh and bone. Why waste my time with lies? Said Sasuke. He turned to leave. He would continue his search for a new book some other time. Because sometimes the truth is not good enough, said Hinata. He turned and faced her once more. She was looking at him but was not really seeing him. It was as if the world around her had gone invisible. He could not force himself to look away. What was she going on about? The world is a very horrible place. It's full of pain, so much suffering and disappointment. We all deserve better, said Hinata. So what if the only way to experience something better than the pain and disappointment is through the beautiful lies that are written on these pages? Quote. Hinata suddenly returned to reality. She opened her mouth to speak but nothing came out. Her cheeks had turned a deep shade of red. He had been wrong. This girl was not under no illusions about romance novels. The perfect world that romance novels depicted merely provided an escape from her reality. She was merely running away. Living out a better existence through the characters on those pages. Running away, just like him. She left him there staring at the space where she had been standing with a fast-beating heart. He saw her paying for the books out of the corner of his eye as he left the store. It was now dark outside. He was about to leap onto the roof and dash away into the darkness when he stopped. Hinata came out moments later. She began walking in the other direction. He substituted with the twig next to her. Heading home, Sasuke said to her. The pale-eyed Hyuga nodded. He began walking in the direction she had been walking in. She remained rooted where she was standing. He looked back at her. Saying that she was confused would be a gross understatement. They remained fixed in a staring contest. His eyes expectant and hers confused. Are you coming? He said impatiently. Hinata followed. They had been walking for about 20 minutes. They had been quiet the whole time. He was slightly surprised by how the atmosphere around them was not laced with any awkwardness. Hinata was becoming more comfortable around him and he did not know what to make of that. On one hand he preferred it when people were uneasy around him. It meant that they would leave him alone when he was not in the mood. On the other hand, Hinata was highly tolerable compared to most of the people he knew. Her company was not bad at all. They reached a block of apartment buildings. Hinata told him that she lived on the second building down the block. Since when is this the Hyuga residence? Said Sasuke. It's not. I don't live there anymore, Hinata whispered with a strange smile. I live with Kurenai, my sensei, said Hinata. Sasuke stopped walking. He gave her a questioning look. I removed myself from my clan, said Hinata. He stood there speechless for a minute before his rage ignited like a match set alight. His Sharingan appeared in the darkness. He felt his fist clenching and his jaw tightening. His anger was consuming, burning, and uncontrollable. It had been a while since he had been this enraged. He felt as though the intoxicating rage was sinking into his very bones. Did she have any idea how? Hinata took a step away from him. He took 2 steps towards her. She took another step backwards. He moved even closer to her than before. They continued like that until her back was pressed against the pole of a streetlight. A kunai would barely fit into the space between their bodies. He refused to shift his eyes away from hers. She stared back at him. He saw fear mixed with confusion in her large eyes. Why? Quote, she had thrown away the one thing he had constantly longed for almost a decade. Did she have any idea about what he would give to have what she had thrown away? He would sacrifice his legs to have back his clan if he could. He would give everything. Why? He growled. The fear and the confusion in her eyes disappeared. A wetness and a profound melancholy appeared. The sadness in her eyes was so profound that a portion of his anger ebbed away. He could not help but think how unfitting it was for someone who had been born with a silver spoon and had been handed everything she wanted to bear such sadness. The sadness in her eyes shined brightly in the darkness. Why throw away the one thing that some of us would kill for? He said in a softer tone. He was so close to her that his lips would touch her forehead if he bent her neck. Her eyes were glued to his neck. He felt the tickling sensation of her breath on his chest. He could almost swear that he could hear her galloping heartbeat. Why? He asked once more. She looked up at him. A fire he did not think she could possess appeared in her eyes. He realized that even while facing impossible odds, Hinata Hyuga would not just roll over and die. She would fight till the bitter end. Because life does not always play out like a fairy tale, whispered Hinata. They stood there for a long moment, their eyes stuck in a staring contest. Hinata finally conceded. She was the first to look away. He took a few steps back. They remained quiet in the darkness of the night. Hinata resumed walking towards the building where she lived. He once again fell into step with her. Only the sharpest katana could cut the tension that surrounded them. Hinata kept her eyes on the ground. He kept his eyes firmly directed in front of him. Hinata stopped when they were close to her destination. Have a good night, Sasuke-san, whispered Hinata. I'll read the book, he said. Hinata lifted her downcast eyes. Surprise was swimming in the large pools of her eyes. You won't regret it, Sasuke-san, she said with the ghost of a smile. On one condition, said Sasuke. You have to tell me your story. Her eyes scanned his own. He saw the discomfort and the hesitation within her eyes. He wanted to know why she had left her clan. He wanted to know why such a privileged girl like her could possess so much sadness in her eyes. Why are you interested in my story? Asked Hinata. I have my reasons, said Sasuke. All of our friends know my story. It's no secret, whispered Hinata. Then it will be easy for you to relate it to me if it's public knowledge, said Sasuke. If I tell you my story, will you tell me yours? Whispered Hinata. There was a quiet breeze that was roaming around. All the street lights were burning and the cloudless night sky was twinkling from up high. They watched as a disheveled drunkard stumbled past them noisily. The drunkard was talking to himself and giggling the entire time. I'll tell you my story, said Hinata. He had doubted that she would agree to the compromise he had proposed. Him reading a book was not nearly as significant as her relating her past to him. Especially a past that appeared to have been a troubled one. Those two things could not be compared. Her acceptance of the compromise once again gave him the feeling that she was after something. He turned to leave. His lonely home awaited him. Sasuke-san, whispered Hinata. He paused. I'll be free on Wednesday. Go to bed, Hinata, said Sasuke. The sun just set a while ago, replied Hinata. He looked at the sky. It was indeed still early into the night. He vanished. Hinata stepped into the living room of their 5-room apartment. A movie was playing on the TV. Mirai came rushing down the corridor on all fours. Hinata flashed her a smile and picked up her. The red-eyed toddler giggled in delight. Hi Mirai-chan, said Hinata. The toddler started squirming in her grip. She often did this when she wanted to be put on the ground. Mirai crawled away the second she placed her on the wooden floor. She made her way down the corridor. The corridor was directly in line with the entrance. The first room on the right was the kitchen. Her and Kurenai's rooms were side by side on the left-hand side of the hallway. The bathroom was directly opposite the entrance of the apartment. Hey, she said to Kurenai, who was leaning over the kitchen counter and paging through a magazine. Mirai was smashing the head of a teddy bear into the marble floor. Hey, Kurenai replied without turning. She entered her room, took off her shoes and plopped flat on the bed. She stared at the ceiling with her hands lying on her stomach. The day had ended with an unexpected turn of events. Sasuke had walked her home. She did not know what to make of that. Secondly, and more importantly, Sasuke had made her agree to tell him about her past. She was conflicted about the development. On one hand, this was a chance for her to grow closer to Sasuke. She needed to grow closer to him in order for her to have the slightest chance of helping him break free from the darkness that held him prisoner. She needed him to open up to her, and that needed them to become closer. She needed him to trust her. On the other hand, she fully knew the gravity of telling him about her past. It was as if she would be undressing herself before his very eyes so that he could see all her scars. Even if she only told him what everyone already knew, there was no way for her to do so without leaving herself vulnerable. And that frightened her to the bone. She was scared of being vulnerable in front of Sasuke, or anyone for that matter. She was scared of being vulnerable in front of a classmate she had only started talking to a little more than 2 months ago. She was frightened that he would know what a failure she was or how useless she was. She was frightened that he would use it against her or mock her. She was frightened of being betrayed. The compromise she had agreed would not even result in an equal exchange. She would expose herself to him and he would read a mere book. It was a bit overwhelming. She took a few deep breaths to calm her nerves. No, it was too early to start having cold feet. It was too early to start having doubts. She had to look at the bigger picture. If she succeeded, her existence would be validated. She would be granted a sweet escape from the voices that tortured her in her head. Determination filled her heart. She would do it. She would tell Sasuke her story. She would expose herself before his very eyes. She would let him see every single scar and imperfection on her being if she had to. This was not about Sasuke seeing her scars or discovering her many shortcomings. This was about achieving something meaningful for once in her life. She would tell him the story of how Hinata Hyuga, the heiress of the Hyuga clan, had grown up into Hinata Hyuga, the disgrace of the Hyuga clan. It was a necessary sacrifice. Sasuke sat beside her. His powerful presence covered her like a fish in the ocean. He looked at her expectantly. She swallowed nervously. Her fingers were gliding over the blades of grass that covered the area they were sitting on beneath the Yoshino tree. The grass was a washed-out green. Her heart was thumping in her chest and she felt as though her insides were being tickled. She took a breath to calm herself. She consoled herself by reminding herself that she was not going to reveal any secrets. She was merely going to tell him what everyone already knew. I've been living with Kurenai since Neji's death. I lost the strength to continue living at the Hyuga residence after he died, she started. And your clan let their precious little heiress leave just like that? Said Sasuke. He was staring at the trees on the opposite side beyond the rectangular and sandy open space that served as the training ground. I stopped being the heiress a long time ago, she said. I stopped being the heiress when I was 12. Quote. Sasuke looked at her surprised. She had gathered that he did not know that she was no longer the heiress. Wasn't Sasuke-san aware? She asked, just for the sake of it. Sasuke's expression cooled off. She felt a jolt of boldness run through her. I guess Sasuke-san was so absorbed in his own matters that he was not really aware of what was happening around him, she said. She found herself feeling at ease around him as the days passed. Getting a little too talkative, aren't we, princess? Said Sasuke. What do you mean? She said with faux innocence. If Sasuke was anyone else, he would have rolled his eyes at her poor acting. The playfulness in her vanished when she remembered why they were sitting there. Sasuke redirected his eyes to the trees on the opposite side. I was never the daughter my father wanted. He always told me that I was too compassionate and too timid to lead the clan. He resented me for what I was, and so did the elders of the clan. He always told me that I lacked the characteristics of a true heiress, but I did not understand what he meant at the time. I was young, she said. She was now staring at her lap. Sasuke was as still and as silent as a grave. Despite the disappointment my father felt towards me, things were bearable because my mother was there. She did not try to change me like my father, nor did she demand that I meet high expectations. She loved me as I was. And then she passed away and things started changing for the worse, she said. It was difficult to keep speaking while there was a lump in her throat. No one would ever understand how big a role her mother had played in her life. She was her rock. She had been an unshakable shelter. She would hide behind her mother and everything would feel all right. It was only as she grew older that she had realized how much her mother had protected her from her clan. Her mother had been her first true friend. She had been everything to her. It took a lot from her not to break down in tears. There was an excruciating wound in her chest that was aggravated every time her mother entered her thoughts. Sasuke was leaning his head against the tree with his eyes closed. He peeked open an eye and looked at her after she had been silent for some time. With my mother gone, there was no one to defend me against father and the elders. They only grew harsher and less tolerant of me. As time went on, I was introduced into the shinobi arts. It became apparent that I was no prodigy and that my unwillingness to hurt others severely impaired my performance. There is nothing that is more valued in the Hyuga clan than strength, and I was extremely lacking in that aspect, she said. Life at the Hyuga residence became increasingly difficult as the years passed. I found myself struggling even more to meet my father's expectations. I would train until my fists bled or until I lost consciousness. Sometimes I would even overexert my eyes to the point where I would become temporarily blind. I was not discouraged though. I was driven to improve, she said. A bleak smile sneaked its way onto her face. It was ice cold, like the way her father used to look at her. My own drive frightened me sometimes. But still, no matter how hard I tried to become stronger and more confident, it was never enough. The gap between how strong I was and how strong I was expected to be only seemed to widen. And I also grew more timid. All I managed to do was to seem more unfit. My father and the rest of the main house resented me even further and grew more disappointed in me. Father's heart grew colder towards me. It worsened to the point where he could not even bear to look at me, she said. She recalled it all as she sat there. All the insults and the way Lady Mimiko used to beat her out of frustration. She remembered the eyes that were filled with disappointment, the whispers of the clan children and the taunts. She remembered how she used to cry herself to sleep. She remembered everything. This was one of the reasons she had been hesitant to relate her story to Sasuke. It made her remember. "Why did you stop?" said Sasuke. His eyes were still closed. She realized how long she had been silent for. "Sorry, I became distracted," she said. Sasuke opened an eye and ran it over her before closing it again. Then one day father had enough. He gave me one last chance to prove myself. He had Hanabi and I duel. If I lost the duel, Hanabi, who possessed the necessary qualities, would be made heiress. I fought Hanabi. I know I could have defeated her, but I hesitated because she was my younger sister, she said. And your sister became the heiress, said Sasuke. Afterwards, father entrusted me to Kurenai-sensei. He said that maybe she would be capable of finding a use for me. I passed the Genin test and was partnered up with Kiba-kun and Shino-kun under Kurenai-sensei, said Hinata. No longer being the heiress did not change much. The insults, the eyes full of disappointment and the whispers worsened, said Hinata. She checked to see if Sasuke was listening. His eyes were on her. She looked away before she could discern the emotions in his eyes. She was afraid to find disappointment and ridicule. With Neji-Nisan no longer hating me, him and I grew closer. We were almost like brother and sister. He meant a lot to me. For me, he was the dim light that shined amid despair behind the doors of the Hyuga residence, she said with a genuine smile on her face. She felt her eyes going wet. And then the war came and Neji died. I could no longer imagine carrying on like I had done my whole life at the Hyuga residence. I was tired. I just had to move away. So I packed my bags and left. And that's how I ended up with Kurenai, said Hinata. She did not mention how her father had called her the biggest failure of his life that day, or how he had told her that if she left she would only become more of a disgrace than she already was. It took some time, but she finally mustered enough courage to gauge Sasuke's reaction. She stared into his pitch-black eyes. Eyes that were weary of life. She searched his eyes and found no ridicule in them nor any disappointment. She was glad to find none. Extremely glad. His eyes almost had no emotion. Almost. She could see the twinkling of an emotion. It burned like the dying flame of a candle that was being overwhelmed by the wind in the dark. It was understanding. It suddenly all made sense. The sadness in her eyes and the abnormal shyness that she had possessed when she was younger. It was all because of her clan. This girl, whom he used to think had everything during their childhood, had gone through suffering and pain. She had not said much, but he could tell just how much she had suffered. He now understood why she had moved away from her clan. In fact, he did not understand how she had stayed there for so long. She looked different from the day before. She herself had not changed. He just saw her differently. He saw the victim of a troubled childhood. He saw a person who had tirelessly tried to overcome the obstacles that had been placed before her. He saw someone who knew what it was to be so desperate to improve. He saw a fighter who had been cast into the fire and had not been consumed. He saw Naruto in her eyes. He saw himself in her eyes. He had always thought of Naruto and himself to be of a different breed from the rest of their former classmates. Their tragic childhoods and the trials they had gone through set them apart from their classmates. He had always thought that it was just the two of them. He had been wrong. How had he missed it? Maybe he had been too absorbed in his own issues to notice that the girl next to him was just like him. Or perhaps it was not his fault. Maybe she just knew how to hide it like Naruto. Maybe she hid it beneath the smile and the politeness. If there was one thing that his brother and the Uchiha massacre had taught him, was that things were not always as they appeared. Hinata Hyuga was one of those things. You sure know how to act, he said. Hinata looked at him. He noticed the question in her eyes. I don't understand what you mean, Hinata said in her usual whisper. You're just like the Dobi. You hide everything behind a smile, he replied. She quickly averted her eyes to the ground. He smirked. Bullseye. Hinata slipped a book from the pocket of her light olive jacket and passed it on to him. Enjoy, she said to him, smiling. Did she feel the powerful connection between them? Did she feel the connection they had due to both their childhoods being akin to the backgrounds of the characters of a tragic novel that could bring even the most stone-hearted to tears? Because he definitely felt it. It was strange to feel so connected to a girl he would never have looked at twice before today. In life, people were connected to one another in various ways. At the most basic level, they were connected to one another due to being of the same species. Because of being human. Some connections were weak and more negligible than others. Some were strong, electric and impossible to ignore. Nationality, blood, class, gender, age and profession were just a few things that formed those connections. It had been obvious from the start that there was a connection between them, but it had not seemed significant. They were connected through nationality. They were both Konoha natives. This was not something to make a fuss about. There were thousands of people with whom he was connected to in that manner. They were also connected due to having been in the same class in the academy and having graduated together. That connection was slightly more meaningful. It was the connection that made her more than just a face in the crowd. And then there was this newfound connection. This one was of a different caliber altogether. It was on a league of its own. There was only one other person whom he shared such a connection with in Konoha. Naruto. In a few moments Hinata had ceased to be a random girl from his childhood and had become the only girl he felt a significant connection to. She became the only girl in all of Konoha that he could relate to. No matter what he chose to do afterwards. Whether he continued tolerating her or completely avoided her going forward, nothing would change. The connection between them would forever exist. This connection was the only connection besides blood that could never be severed. Childhoods meant a lot to him. They shaped them into who they were. So to share a connection based on having experienced similar childhoods was no small matter. The invisible connection felt so significant that it was nearly visible to the eye. It was electric and as strong as diamond. They could not run away from it. "You asked me if I would tell you my story if you told me yours," he said. He had shut his eyes a while ago and leaned his head against the tree again. "You don't have to," she whispered. "I shouldn't bother anymore," he said. "Are you saying that you want to?" questioned Hinata. Her voice was laced with a touch of excitement and hopefulness. He gave a minuscule nod. It was barely noticeable. He did not want to seem overeager. Being overeager implied desperation, and desperation was not a good look. "What made Sasuke-san change his mind?" said Hinata. The answer was simple. He wanted to soften the voices in his head. He had been hit by the realization that opening to her about his mother on the anniversary of her birthday had temporarily alleviated the pain that plagued him. "Tell someone about it and you'll feel better," people like to say. He had considered that course of action to be too simple and too sentimental to be effective. The conversation that had taken place between Hinata and him on his mother's birthday day had proved him wrong. If confiding in Hinata about his mother made him feel slightly better, it followed that telling her about other aspects of his past would also help. It would soften the voices in his head and lift the pain a bit. He had given it some thought. It was the only way he was confident would soften the voices in his head that tortured him. Other than taking his own life, of course. His pride was against the idea. The part of him that hated depending on anyone other than himself was against it. The part of him that hated being exposed and put in a position of vulnerability was against it. The part of him that wanted nothing to do with others was against it. The part of him that hated discussing his past was also against. But damn, the voices in his head tortured him, and the pain, the guilt and the regret in his heart was unbearable. He would be a fool to not take advantage of anything that could provide even the smallest bit of relief. No matter how temporary the relief would be. The whole thing went against everything that he was, but he was desperate, and desperate people did uncharacteristic things. There was one reason why the person he would open up to could not be Naruto. Naruto was his brother in all but blood, and he understood him more than anyone, but it could not be him. Naruto possessed a fatal flaw. He always expected or pushed people to let go of their pasts. That was something he would never allow himself to do. Never. So Hinata, the only girl he shared such a deep connection with, was the second best option. It had to be her or Naruto. The three of them cut from the same cloth. They knew what it was to suffer. But he would never tell her all of this. He would rather die. "I have plenty of time to kill if you haven't noticed," he replied to her question. He felt the seductive whispers of sleep calling out to him. He had barely slept last night. "When we first met under this tree, I saw the look in your eyes. You thought I was a spoiled and naive girl who knew nothing about hardship or suffering," whispered Hinata. He opened his eyes and looked at her. Strands of light that had broken through the spaces between the branches and the leaves were radiating on her ivory skin. Her shiny long hair was a sharp contrast to her pale skin. Like blood on white paper. Do you still think so? She said. You and I are of the same breed, Hyuga, said Sasuke. Her eyes shimmered. She was silent for a while. I did not know Sasuke-san also enjoys stalking dark-haired shinobi, she said with faux surprise. Very funny, he said in a dry tone. She smiled at his reply. It was a tiny barely there curving of the lips. She smiled a lot around him lately. Genuine smiles too, not those pathetic, uncomfortable and uncertain smiles she had showed him initially. They had been sitting in silence for a while now, but the mood was not filled with discomfort like in their first meetings. It was something else altogether. Familiarity. Their relationship had evolved from a stiff acquaintance and into something that Hinata could describe as resembling a friendship. She did not know if Sasuke felt the same thing as her or whether it was a one-sided sentiment. What it would have been like if Sasuke and her had not come from troubled backgrounds, if they had not been so damaged. Would they have gotten along better while they were younger? Would he have seemed so intimidating and would she have been too timid to approach him? Sasuke-san, do you ever wonder what life would have been like if we had come from different backgrounds? She said. If you could have walked a different path in life, what would you have chosen become? Said Hinata. I don't know, Sasuke said after taking a long time to answer. There was a sadness in his eyes after he said these words. It was as though her question had touched something delicate within him or brought him to a realization that saddened him. I would have opened a flower shop, she said in an attempt to lighten the mood. He looked at her curiously. Flowers, he said without much emotion. Yes, flowers. I was infatuated with flowers as a child, she said. I was told to let go of my foolish infatuation with flowers and focus on being the heiress, but I never really lost interest. If only clans did not pressurize their future leaders so ridiculously, said Sasuke. If my father and Konoha had not put Itachi under so much pressure, then maybe things would be different, Sasuke said with a faraway look in his eyes. A volcano of emotions erupted with her. Firstly, Sasuke was once again touching a very sensitive subject in her presence. Which meant she was making progress. Secondly, his words made her head spin with confusion. If his father and Konoha had not put so much pressure on Itachi. What was he talking about? What do you mean, Sasuke-san? She asked. She hoped that she did not sound too eager to know. Forget what I said, said Sasuke. He was once again looking detached instead of melancholic. It was as though her work question had sobered him. But, she said, too curious to let the issue go. Hinata, he said, his eyes locked on her own. They held a dangerous warning. She chose to let it go but still had a dozen questions in her mind. Despite him not willing to elaborate on what he meant, this was good. He was revealing things to her. No matter how small. Earlier you said that Neji used to hate you. Why? Said Sasuke. Can I tell you about it some other time? She said with a smile. She was tired of speaking about her past. Sasuke said nothing. He stretched his neck to the left and then towards the right, leaned his head against the tree and shut his eyes. When are you going to be free again? Said Sasuke. He surprised her once more. Just like when he had walked her home. Tomorrow morning, she replied. You'll be here, said Sasuke. He said it with so much indifference that she wondered whether he really wanted to know or if he was just passing time. Do you want me to be here? She said, throwing caution to the wind. He opened his eyes and settled them on her own. She concluded that the answer was yes. She was getting better at reading his emotions by looking his eyes. They looked different when he agreed with her and when he disagreed. Something had shifted within Sasuke when it came towards her. It was in the way he looked at her. She did not know what it was or what it meant, but Sasuke now regarded her differently. Something in her heart told her that it was not necessarily a bad thing. A green blur dropped into the clearing. It was Lee in his infamous green jumpsuit. The hair gel on his hair was shining brilliantly. He stood there looking at them with his hand on his waist and panting harshly. He was soaked in sweat. Ah, Sasuke. And Hinata-chan. I am glad to see you too. It's been a while since I've seen you, Sasuke. You and I should catch up with a friendly spar. He was speaking faster than he could run. Can't talk right now. I have to push past my limits. Keep your flames of youth burning brightly. Quote. He disappeared in the same manner that he appeared. She could not resist laughing. Lee was such a peculiar person. Lee-kun is quite passionate, she said. I can't say I missed seeing him in that green abomination of his, said Sasuke. The sickening sound of bone smashing into wood sounded once more. He turned his back on her and punched the tree again. And again. And again, drops of velvet blood plummeted to the forest floor. He kept on pounding, again and again, faster, faster, harder and harder. Meanwhile, crimson droplets kept falling. She performed a shunshin jutsu and appeared next to him. His arm was moving at a speed she could never keep up with. She heard the impact before she saw it. The impact was tremendous, so much so that droplets of blood jumped from his skin and flew right onto her cheek. Stop, she attempted once more. He did not heed her words. He continued pummeling the tree like a wild beast. Her arm shot out towards him. All she had to do was touch him. Just a touch and his arm would go limp. Her glowing fingers were fractions of a centimeter away from their target when his mismatched dojutsu activated. His furious eyes struck her with terror. Earlier that day, "Let's agree to disagree," proposed Hinata. They had met the following morning just like he had suggested. They had spent close to an hour arguing about the book she had given him the day before. She had not expected that the book would be the main topic of the meeting. Sasuke had read a large section of the book all in one night and had more than a few things to say about it. The last Uchiha held nothing back. He criticized the plot. He criticized the protagonist's optimism. He also saw no logical reason for the protagonist's love interest to reciprocate his feelings. He was clearly not a fan. He was too much of a realist to be convinced by the make-believe world of the book. Despite him criticizing it so much, she could tell he was invested, and that was the writer's intention after all, to keep the readers turning the pages. Debating with him meant staying on her toes. He was a challenging opponent. Despite that, she would be lying if she said that she was not enjoying herself. "I'm a bit surprised that you spent so much time reading it," she said. "I had trouble sleeping," was his straight-to-the-point reply. "There's a herbal remedy I know that might be able to help," she suggested. It was around 10 am. The sun was warm but not yet uncomfortably hot. There was an enjoyable breeze that was dancing around. The carefree leaves rattled in the breeze. "I doubt it," said Sasuke. She knew he would not readily accept her help when it came to his health. Shinobi were like that, stubborn. Belonging to the male species made them even more resistant towards help. "It's a male thing," Ino liked to say. "But," she said. He cut her off before she could finish. "Listen, princess. Your herbs won't be much help when it comes to stopping nightmares," said Sasuke. His eyes were directed straight ahead. There was a strange aura of vulnerability surrounding him. It was a stark contrast to the cool and indifferent expression on his face. The change in aura was invisible to the eye but impossible to miss. She had not fully become accustomed to seeing Sasuke in such a state. Despite being invincible as he was, she was constantly being reminded that he too was also human. And right now he was opening up to her, which meant that an opportunity to further her goal was being presented. "Nightmares," she said, hoping he would elaborate. His silence suggested that the conversation was over. "I have seen things you could never imagine," said Sasuke. Their eyes tentatively connected. The implications of what was taking place was all too apparent to both of them. His words drew her in. Her curiosity had been sparked. Despite being curious about what it was that gave him nightmares, a small part of her did not want to find out. Men, women and children cut open, abused and ruined by Orochimaru's experiments. Most of them didn't survive. A few survived, although, killing them would have been a much greater mercy than letting them live when they had been so irreparably ruined, he said. He turned his head in her direction. Orochimaru did unthinkable things to the subjects of his experiments. Things you would never be able to forget. "I see," she said after a lengthy stretch of silence. "I never cared even a bit about what the snake was doing to those people at the time. I only cared about becoming powerful enough to kill Itachi. And that haunts me the most," said Sasuke. "Things changed after the war. Reality suddenly caught up with me. It was only then when I realized that I had just stood by while those people were being experimented on. I soon began hearing their screams and their pleas for mercy when I closed my eyes to sleep." Quote. He was drowning in guilt. She could see it in his eyes and hear it hidden within his detached tone. The cause of his state was becoming less enigmatic each day. Between the feelings of loss that she suspected he still felt for his clan and the guilt he carried on his shoulders, it was no surprise why he was depressed. "I sometimes have nightmares too. About Neji's death. Sometimes I see him smiling. And sometimes he's dying," she said. The guilt that was the result of feeling as if you were the reason someone had died was a feeling she was well acquainted with. Neji had lost his life because of her and she would never forgive herself. She also knew nightmares had a sick way of reminding you A thunderbolt of realization struck her. She realized the words that had come out of her mouth. Words that spoke of issues that she never wanted anyone to know. She had forgotten herself in the moment. It scared her how much she related to him sometimes. What did the fact that she related so much to someone who was drowning in darkness say about her? She had never considered herself to be plagued by darkness. She was just sad sometimes. The idea that she too might be drowning in darkness made her uncomfortable. But then again she had nothing to worry about. Everything would be okay once she succeeded in her goal. The sadness would disappear once she proved to herself that her existence was meaningful. And no, she realized, she was not entirely like him. Whereas he was weary of life, she was not. She wanted to live. She still believed that she could validate her existence. She still had hope. That was something she doubted Sasuke had anymore. The thought of Sasuke not having any hope saddened her. What was life without hope? Sometimes I ask myself what my mother would think if she knew that I just stood by while Orochimaru did those things, said Sasuke. Within a couple of months he had changed from being someone whose sole focus had been revenge to someone who often questioned himself about what his mother would think of his actions. Life was one funny bastard. A true comedian. The irony of it all did not make the question any less valid. Would his mother understand, or would she be ashamed of him? She would understand that you are not evil. The tremendous hunger to know where she was going with this forced him to look at nothing but her. Your remorse would show her that you have a conscience and that you were just lost. You would not be feeling any remorse if you were truly evil, she said with conviction. He carefully analyzed her words. The idea she had brought forth had never crossed his mind. He would be lying if he said it did not give him the tiniest bit of hope. It was a dim light amid despair. But I eat babies and I don't feel any remorse, he said after a lengthy moment. Hinata rolled her eyes in response. What was that? He said. What was what? She whispered. The thing you did with your eyes, he responded. You mean rolling my eyes? Replied the Hyuga. If I was pathetic at genjutsu I would suspect that I'm stuck in one, he said. Hinata's eye grew wide. Because I rolled my eyes? Whispered Hinata. He nodded. Is the idea of me rolling my eyes that hard to believe? Hinata questioned with a raised eyebrow. Yes, he replied. It's not the first time I roll my eyes. It's just that you have never seen me before, said Hinata. She seemed a bit offended that he thought she was incapable of rolling her eyes. The truth was he had not brought it up because he thought she was incapable of doing so. He had brought up the issue because he sometimes still struggled to reconcile this version of Hinata with the past version. And because flustering her, he had discovered, was not such a bad way to pass time. Once again, if I wasn't so well versed in genjutsu, he said. Is the idea of me rolling my eyes more difficult to believe than the idea of Sasuke-san being hooked on a romance novel? She whispered with faux curiosity. He had no response for that. Hinata realized it and smiled. She looked extremely satisfied with herself in that moment. On a serious note, Sasuke-san, she started. All playfulness had vanished. Remorse is what separates evil men from misguided men. Your mother would understand. She whispered. What do you know about a dead woman's perspective? He said. She smiled. He could not think of a reason why she was smiling. All I know is that mothers love their children, she whispered. Her words struck a chord inside him. Maybe his mother would understand. Maybe she would forgive him for choosing the path he had taken. The idea was appealing. It was so appealing that he barely noticed when she told him that she had to leave for work and then left him sitting alone. The idea Hinata had planted in him warmed up his cold insides just a bit. Sasuke shut the red door of the Hokage's office. The Hokage's office was plain and slightly disorganized. The enormous window behind the Hokage's desk overlooked a large portion of the village. The walls were painted a pale orange. This version of the Hokage office was larger, more modern and slightly more luxurious than the one that had been destroyed during Pain's assault. Kakashi Hatake was the man that now sat behind the most influential desk in Konoha. He sat hunched over his desk with his chin resting on his clasped fingers. His silver hair concealed his disabled left eye. He was dressed in a gray long-sleeved shirt with his regular mask on. He no longer wore a Hitei. Tsunade's old assistant was leaning over Kakashi's shoulder. She straightened up when she noticed him. Ah, my cute little student. How have the woods been treating you? Said Kakashi. What do you want, Kakashi? The pathetic Anbu you sent told me you wanted to see me, said Sasuke. Kakashi's assistant kept eyeballing him. Like what you see, he said to her. I don't usually go for older women, but maybe we can work something out if you promise to make it worthwhile. Don't flatter, the assistant managed to say before Kakashi interrupted. Okay, Kakashi said exaggeratedly. Let's get down to business. His tone was cheerful. How would you feel about going on a mission? It's a diplomatic mission. A delegation is being sent to a village that hasn't yet joined the allied shinobi nations. I was thinking of sending you, one of the heroes of the war, as part of the delegation, said Kakashi. He had instantly changed from sounding like his childish old sensei to sounding like a man worthy to be Hokage. Sasuke was indifferent towards the alliance Kakashi and Naruto were fighting to establish with other nations. He had grown numb to everything that revolved around being a shinobi. He was at a point where even life itself seemed pointless at times. No, he replied. Come on Sasuke, don't you want to catch a breath of fresh air? You've been cooped up in the village walls for months, said Kakashi. My answer remains, he said. Kakashi stared at him for a long time. The assistant sent the Hokage an elaborate glance. Kakashi ignored her and kept looking at him. Sasuke was losing his patience. He had given him his answer. He did not have to stand there and watch Kakashi give him that look. He hated that look. It was the same look Naruto gave him, pity. He turned around to leave. He was done here. Kakashi finally spoke again. The Hokage's words made his blood boil. Why do you keep doing this to yourself? Asked Kakashi. The good mood that Hinata had left him in was shattered. When will you move on from the past and stop punishing yourself? Said Kakashi. The temperature in the room dropped below freezing. Look at me when I'm speaking to you, said Kakashi. His former sensei was losing his temper. The Hokage's assistant shifted uncomfortably. Maybe I should step outside, Tsunade's apprentice said. Neither of them paid her any mind. Or what Kakashi? He said. He did not turn around to look at the Hokage. Are you going to spank me? Tell me to stand in a corner and think about my actions. Quote. He spun around. The assistant flinched. He felt a twinge of satisfaction at her reaction. His eyes took on a superior form. Sharingan in the left, Rinnegan in the right. Did Kakashi think he wanted this? Did he think he enjoyed living like this? Did he expect him to forget everything? To act as if everything was sunshine and rainbows? Maybe he wanted him to walk around with a silly smile on his face like Naruto. He was the last of his clan. He was alone. He had done things that were shameful. He had betrayed people who loved him. His life was empty. Was he supposed to pretend everything was okay? Tell me what you'll do Kakashi, he spat. He moved closer towards Kakashi and his assistant like a predator stalking its prey. Kakashi observed him calmly. Sasuke, started Tsunade's apprentice. Kakashi held up his hand. She went silent. Thank you for your time Sasuke. You can leave now, Kakashi said in an insincerely light-hearted tone. Kakashi's response was disappointing. He had not taken the bait. Sasuke did not need to be told to leave twice. Looking at his old sensei was pissing him off by the second. He spun on his heel and headed to the door. His fingers were nearly on the doorknob when Kakashi spoke again. Only you can turn your life around, said Kakashi. One more thing, I would not be an veteran Junin much less the Hokage if I could be provoked into a needless fight so easily. Quote. He swung open the door with so much force that it nearly flew off its hinges. It was close to sunset when Hinata found herself on her way Sasuke's home. She was a ball of nervousness and uncertainty. She carried with her a box of herbs that she planned to give to the insomnia-ridden Uchiha. She knew that the herbs would not help with the nightmares but they would assist Try with other sleep-related problems. She was conflicted about going there. She felt as though she was overstepping her boundaries by appearing at his home uninvited. Despite that, she just wanted to help in whatever way she could. Helping others was natural for her. Almost like breathing, it was one of the small things that made her feel like her existence meant something. Beyond helping him because it was part of her nature, she was also doing it because she was on a mission to save him. She had to do whatever she could to further that effort. She had discovered the location of his place of residence from Kiba. Her canine-loving teammate had stumbled upon his home while training with Akamaru in the forest. She still recalled the directions. She sprinted past a pond with two flat-faced rocks. He lives south of Konoha, just at the start of the forest, beyond the pond with the two whitish flat-faced rocks, Kiba's voice repeated in her head. She was close. She activated her Byakugan and scouted the area. She spotted a residential structure about 100 meters further ahead. She soon arrived at the clearing on which she had spotted the structure. Trees surrounded the circular clearing like a fence. A wooden cabin was situated right in the center and a sole tree stood within the bounds of the fence-like arrangement of trees. She had absolutely no interest in the cabin or anything else for that matter. Her attention was being held hostage by the scene that was taking place by the lone tree that stood within the clearing. None of the scenes she had imagined arriving to had been close to this disturbing. She watched the scene almost unblinkingly. The box of herbs that was in her hand fell to the ground. She barely even noticed. The hairs on the back of her head were standing up straight. Her heart rate continued quickening until she felt as though her heart would leap out of her chest. She was a kunoichi. She had been trained to handle distributing situations. But truth be told, she was frightened by what she was seeing. She wanted to run away but her body remained frozen, as if she was a recently deceased person who was going through rigor mortis. A strange coldness penetrated her knees. No, what she was witnessing was not disturbing. It was sickening, and Sasuke was right at the center of it all. He was standing with his back to her and pummeling his fist into the tree. His body was emitting an aura that was so deadly that it made her shiver. Who knew that raw undiluted rage could be so frightening? Underneath the rage was a dam of tremendous chakra that was being barely suppressed. The dam wall was so close to being destroyed but had not yet conceded. It still held back his chakra. He was so full of rage that she would not be surprised if he started burning down the forest. This was not a mere physical act of anger. This could only be described as self-inflicted abuse. He was hurting himself. The blood covering his hand was evidence. It felt like an eternity had passed with her observing his shirtless form. An eternity stuck in a nightmare. His whole body, from his back to even the side of his face, was glistening with sweat. It was not because of the heat but because of exertion. She flinched each time she heard the sickening sound of bone crashing into wood. A realization dawned on her. He would break the bones in his hand with the amount of force he was using. "Stop, Sasuke-san," she shouted. He paused mid-movement, turned his head and focused on her. A tense moment passed, and then something ignited within him. Like the way a flame ignited paper. His fury increased tenfold, like an enraged beast that had just been further provoked. The sickening sound of bone smashing into wood sounded once more. He turned his back on her and punched the tree again. And again, and again, and again. Drops of velvet blood plummeted to the forest floor. He kept on pounding, again and again, faster, faster, harder and harder. Meanwhile, crimson droplets kept falling. Her mind told her to leave. Her body told her to leave. She could not bear to watch him hurt himself like this. She had seen much more gruesome sights during her time but that did not make the one before her any less morbid. "Leave, leave, leave," her mind screamed at her. "You don't have to stay for this," her mind screamed. "Go, run," her mind kept insisting. Sasuke kept pummeling his fist into the tree mercilessly. The sound was driving her insane. She could be gone in an instant but her feet remained rooted in place. The sickening sound of bone crashing against wood increased in volume. Her ears begged to be rescued from the noise. She was starting to see him as a friend. What if Ino was in the same situation? Would she walk away if it was Shino, Kiba, Shikamaru or Choji? No, she could not just leave him. She was on a mission. She had vowed to save him from the darkness. She had vowed to save him from himself. There had not been a moment as critical as this one since her mission had begun. There was only one course of action to take. She performed a shunshin jutsu and appeared next to him. His arm was moving at a speed she could never keep up with. She heard the impact before she saw it. The impact was tremendous, so much so that droplets of blood jumped from his skin and flew right onto her cheek. "Stop," she attempted once more. He did not heed her words. He continued pummeling the tree like a wild beast. Her arm shot out towards him. All she had to do was touch him. Just a touch and his arm would go limp. Her glowing fingers were fractions of a centimeter away from their target when his mismatched dojutsu activated. Time seemed to slow down. Fear pounced on her like a hungry predator pouncing on its prey. He performed a backflip and escaped her reach. The movement was flawless. It was a testament to him being a true prodigy. And also a testament that she would be in danger should he lash out at her. "What the hell do you?" yelled Sasuke. Her body sliced through the air and crashed into the hardness of the tree. It happened so quickly that it took her a moment to deduce what had happened. He was on top of her. He had pinned her to the tree. His larger hand was binding her wrists together in an iron grip. Her arms were pinned above her head. His superior physical strength made it impossible to escape from his bloody grip. Their proximity meant that her legs had very limited mobility, so she could not kick her way out of this. She thought of 2 techniques she could use to escape but chose not to use them. The situation did not warrant their use. Sasuke was not her enemy. The space between them was almost non-existent. Their noses were almost touching. His mismatched dojutsu eyes were burning into her own. The height difference between them forced her to look up and forced him to bend down. His breath was tickling her nose. The smell of sweat and blood was flooding her nostrils. She could almost feel the heat that his shirtless chest was emitting. She subconsciously realized that she had never been in such a position with a shirtless member of the opposite sex before. "I'll ask you again, what the hell were you trying to do?" said Sasuke. His breath grazed her face when he spoke. She looked away from his enraged eyes. Her eyes tentatively explored the jagged scars that surrounded the area above the point where his arm had been amputated. "Look at me," he said impatiently. She hated his tone. She hesitantly looked up at him. "I was trying to stop you from hurting yourself," she said. Her voice was soft, but she was certain he could hear her considering their proximity. "Stop doing this to yourself," she said. His grip tightened around her wrists. The anger that had slowly been receding returned full force. "Did Naruto send you? Or was it Kakashi? Is it because of them you've been spending so much time with me?" "Those bastards," said Sasuke. His words confused her. "What do Naruto-kun and Hokage-sama have to do with anything?" she asked. Being this close to him made her aware of how she had never realized how deeply red the Sharingan was. "I'm sick of them telling me to move on. As if there's some magical switch I can turn on that will erase everything that has ever happened," he said. "I'm sick of being treated like I'm blowing things out of proportion. What do they expect me to do?" Sasuke said in an angry rant. "Should I be happy that I've lived such a shitty life? Should I walk around acting as if all is right with the world when it isn't?" said Sasuke. It was in moments like these that she felt like she underestimated the kind of inner turmoil that plagued him. The only thing that she could think in that moment was that Sasuke Uchiha was broken inside. A tear slid down her face. In the midst of the emotional atmosphere, his extremely close proximity and the unplanned tears, the only thing she could think to whisper was, "You're hurting me." Quote. He glanced at her bound wrists, released them and stepped away from her. She absent-mindedly rubbed her wrists. She paid little attention to her wrists though. Her attention was focused on the broken shinobi standing an arm's length away from her. "It's almost as if they think I enjoy being this way." "I don't," he said. "With the way things are, death does not seem like a bad option sometimes." Quote. Her heart rate quickened exponentially. He sometimes considered taking his own life. The idea made her shiver. "I know I'll never understand what you've gone through, but hurting yourself is not the answer," she said quickly. There was a sense of urgency that had taken a hold of her. Knowing he sometimes had suicidal thoughts made her feel as though time was running out. "What will? Acting like you do, pretending that life is all sunshine and rainbows," Sasuke ridiculed. He was now making this about her. Something told her that if she did not leave now she was going to get hurt. She was starting to doubt that she would get through him in this state. But she was scared of leaving him. Scared of leaving someone who had admitted to having suicidal thoughts alone. "Wake up. Life is no fairy tale. You especially should know," said Sasuke. Her legs finally cooperated. She painfully took a step forward. And then another. And another. "If life was all sunshine and rainbows then Neji wouldn't be where he is right now," said Sasuke. She stopped walking. Her mind was no longer functioning as it should. The shock she felt towards what he had said made it difficult to think properly. He was now bringing Neji into this. He knew how much of a sensitive subject Neji's death was. So why was he doing it? Of all the petty things he could do, of all the low blows he could have delivered, dragging Neji into this was the lowest. He was using Neji's death just to prove a point. He wouldn't be rotting in the dirt now, would he? Have you seen a rotting corpse? "I'm certain Neji doesn't look half as pretty as he used to," said Sasuke. Anger began filling her insides. The unseen force was drowning her, slowly crushing her lungs to an extent that she almost had to step back and compose herself. It felt so foreign. It was sickening. She felt as if she could spill her lunch any moment. She looked up at him. He smirked. A tiny arrogant smirk. A satisfied smirk. Was he satisfied that he was causing her pain? Was he happy that she was feeling the pain he was feeling? Misery loved company. Was that what this was about? He wanted her to share in his misery so badly that he would stoop so low to achieve it. Her hand moved on its own. His all-seeing eyes followed her hand the entire time, but he showed no intent of stopping her. Her hand struck its target. The sound of flesh hitting flash tore through the forest. The impact snapped his unbraced neck to the other side. A moment of silence passed. She realized what had happened. She had slapped Sasuke Uchiha. He slowly turned his neck and looked at her. The adrenaline and the anger coursing through her veins made her unafraid. And so, she slapped him again. Her wrist screamed in pain. The impact had run all the way up to her wrist. A pinkish handprint was now stamped on his cheek, heavily contrasting with his pale skin. She threw one last look at him, and then she walked away. She felt his eyes on her back the entire time. Shino Aburame considered himself a simple individual. He had a simple goal, to be the best shinobi he could manage to be and to represent his clan to the best of his ability. He had a simple passion, insects. His favorite dish was simple, beef negamaki. His favorite color, which was gray, was also simple. He had simple hobbies like reading insect encyclopedias. He was definitely a simple individual. Oh, he was also in love with Hinata. It was a simple thing really. He was in love with Hinata Hyuga. He turned off the shower, swung open the misty glass shower door and stepped out. He wrapped a gray towel around his waist and proceeded to dry his dripping hair with a smaller towel. He went on to brush his teeth before exiting his ensuite bathroom. His bedroom reflected the philosophy he had adopted in life, simplicity. The walls were painted in a muted shade of brown and plain bookshelves lined one of the walls. He owned a vast collection of books, most of them being nonfiction. He was an organized person. His books were sorted according to the alphabet. Even the clothes in his closet were sorted according to color. Being organized simplified life. He put on a pair of gray pants and an olive t-shirt. He layered the outfit with a khaki jacket that went down to his thighs. He always wore a jacket when he left his home. The jacket had a high collar that covered his neck and chin but left the rest of his face exposed. He had lately been exposing his face in the same way he had done in his genin days. He fastened on his hitai and slid on a round pair of dark shades before leaving the room. He came across his father on the veranda. He was sitting on a plastic picnic chair, reading a scroll and drinking a cup of coffee. His jacket and dark goggles were absent. His father was a man of few words and a very logical thinker. He never consumed alcohol nor did he take his coffee with milk or sugar. He never touched sweet things. Some even viewed him as a cold man. He had no complaints about his father's character. The man was supportive. He mentored him in the ways of the shinobi. He was also present as a father and a husband. On top of that, he shared his interests. He was more than adequate as a father. Besides, he was fortunate to still have his father. Ino and Shikamaru were not as fortunate in that regard. Kiba was waiting for him at the gate. He was dressed in standard issue Konoha shinobi uniform trousers and a black leather jacket with a white t-shirt underneath it. His wild hair completed his rugged aesthetic. Akamaru waged his tail as he approached the pair. The huge canine was barking in what he had learned to associate with happiness. At long last the perpetual ball of sunshine arrives, said Kiba. Good morning to you too, Kiba, he said. I've been waiting for nearly 30 minutes, said Kiba. I am not governed by your timetable, he said. I haven't even told you what happened on my mission and you're already being difficult, said Kiba. Akamaru barked in support of his partner. I am merely stating an indisputable fact, he said. You really have to brush up on your people skills or else you'll remain single for life, said Kiba. They left the Aburame residence. The gigantic Akamaru followed his partner and his partner's teammate with all the loyalty he could muster. He had found himself frequently working in the administration department in the aftermath of the war. He rarely went beyond the village walls nowadays. The work in the administration department was not exciting but he did not mind. Missions that required his specific skill set were extremely limited. He could join the tracking division of Anbu of course, his special skill set would be put to use. Unfortunately the idea of traveling across lands hunting missing nins and degenerate thugs did not appeal to him. One career path had piqued his interest, teaching. It was not a prestigious role but it was one that was crucial to the survival of the village and the continuation of its shinobi forces. For now, their generation was carrying the weight of the world but their generation would eventually perish. Those that followed after them needed to be equipped to carry the weight of the world. The future of the Konoha lied in the children. They would be the bearers of the will of fire. There was no glory to found in being a teacher. Despite that, he did not see being involved in the development of the future shinobi of the village as something to be ashamed of. Plus being a teacher had a level of simplicity that appealed to him. He was not lazy, not at all, it was just that preferred to choose the simpler option whenever he had options. He had been that way for as long as he could remember. I was involved with her, said Kiba. Who are we talking about exactly? He said, abandoning his musings. The feudal lord's daughter, said Kiba. The daughter of the same feudal lord whose family you were escorting back home, he said, not believing Kiba's recklessness. Yeah, said Kiba, a wolf-fish grin appearing on his features. I know, it was reckless but that's not the point, Kiba said defensively. What is it then? He said, trying to understand the hot-headed Inuzuka's reasoning. Here's what happened. She and I started talking when she started questioning me about shinobi. The more we talked the more we got to know one another. And we soon connected. She's intelligent and really down-to-earth and open-minded for a feudal lord's daughter. The fact that she's nice to look at does not help. He sighed. Being ruled by emotion was problematic. Shinobi needed to always be objective. The ability to separate your emotions from a situation and take the best course of action was imperative. You're giving me the look you're giving me now because you probably don't understand. You see man, we sometimes only discover the best things in life when we throw caution to the wind, said Kiba. The best things in life. Sounds like you really fancied this girl, he said. Kiba had gone through a couple of flings but he had never spoken of any of them in such a manner. You have no idea, Kiba said with a playful grin and a glimmer of soberness in his eyes that did not match his grin. I'm just glad we were separated while our relationship had not advanced too much. I have a feeling that if we stayed together for longer I wouldn't be able to let go of her, said Kiba. You're sure or getting soft, he said for the sake of annoying his rugged teammate. Maybe I am, said Kiba with an accepting smile. He realized how far Kiba had come over the years. For the Inuzuka to not throw a fit after being accused of being soft was a true indication of maturity. His lips curled into a minuscule smile. Take it from me Shino and apply it to whatever situation you come across, said Kiba. Sometimes waiting for the right moment leads to nothing but missed opportunities. Sometimes the right moment never comes and you end up being too late. Kiba's words struck him in the deepest corner of his heart. He had not told Hinata about his feelings because he was waiting for the right moment to do so. He wanted to tell her how he felt so badly. The problem was that he was not ready to tell her. And to an extent, he believed, she too was not ready to know. She had gone through trying times in the last few months. From losing Neji, removing herself from her clan and suffering from a broken heart because of Naruto. Discovering that her teammate, who was like brother to her, was in love with her would be placing too much stress on her. She needed some calm in her life, at least just for a while longer. Although he wanted nothing more than to tell her that he loved her, although he wanted to tell her that he saw her face in his dreams and sometimes heard her voice whispering into his ear, he would wait. Sitting on his feelings and doing nothing about them was torture. But this was what was best for Hinata. She needed a break from all the drama. Although he did not like to admit it, fear was another thing that was holding him back. There was no guarantee that she would reciprocate his feelings. Despite that, he believed that love was something that was developed and not something that just materialized without reason or cause. She did not need to reciprocate his feelings from the onset. All he needed was a chance. A chance to try by all means to make her fall in love with him. That's all he needed, a chance. He did not have the faintest idea how he would get her to fall in love with him, but damn it, he would do whatever he could to make that happen. The idea Kiba had planted in his head kept persisting. His words had affected him more than he was willing to admit. What if not making his move would result in someone else swooping in and winning her over? What if waiting would only result in him being too late? Reckon you'll meet her again, he asked Kiba. Who knows? Life sure is one unpredictable bastard. Quote. If someone were to ask him when exactly had he started developing feelings for Hinata, he would reply by saying he could not quite recall. If someone were to ask him why he had feelings for her, on the other hand, he would easily give them a variety of reasons. She was compassionate. While her clan viewed that trait of hers as a weakness, he on the other hand viewed it as one of her greatest strengths. He had met very few people in his 17 years of life who were as compassionate as Hinata. He knew how much of an advantage, from a practical standpoint, having someone as compassionate as her as a significant other would be. The compassion his mother had shown him in his childhood made him know its significance. Secondly, she was an earnest worker. She had shed a lot of blood and tears to be the person she currently was. It was through hard work that she could now stand shoulder to shoulder with her peers in terms of competence. It was through hard work that she had broken free from shell of timidity. She was full of drive. Whenever she wanted something, she would stop almost at nothing to attain it. Her compassionate nature and her hard-working nature had left him no choice but to admire her. Most importantly, she had accepted him for who he was. She had never been deterred by insects and his passion for insects. Unlike many of his peers during their childhoods, she had not been put off by his love for insects. "I think insects are fascinating," he recalled her saying once. She had stammered out those words to him so long ago, before they had even truly understood what it meant to take a person's life. He had been afraid of being different once upon a time, afraid of not being considered normal. Now that he thought about it, it was Hinata who had unintentionally encouraged him to embrace himself. On top of that, Hinata and him just clicked. They made a hell lot of sense. Was it really a surprise that he had feelings for her? Beyond the fact that he admired her character and that she accepted him for who he was, and beyond the fact that they clicked, were his hormones. He was a young man, so being physically attracted to her was not something to write home about. Hinata Hyuga made his blood rush. When people spoke about physical attraction, they usually focused on the obvious characteristics that attracted the eye. For him that was not the case. The thing that stood out to him the most when it came to physical attraction was not the front and back combo as Kiba liked to call it. It was demeanor. He was not oblivious to the fact that Hinata ranked quite high in terms of the so-called front and back combo. He was a young man and he had eyes. But her demeanor affected him on a whole other level. Her calm, soft-spoken and gentle demeanor drove him insane. The way in which she spoke and moved made him feel things he would never dare confess to any ear. Her calm, unexcitable way of speaking made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Her smile, which was never more than a graceful curve of the lips and never a tooth-revealing grin, made his heartbeat quicken. The unsure and awkward movements of her former self had faded with time. What remained were the dignified and gentle movements born of a high-class background. The way she moved made it difficult not to stare sometimes. It made his palms sweat. She was seductive and she did not even know it. The idea seemed preposterous, but it was true. She unknowingly had him wrapped around her little finger as though she was a seasoned seductress and he a gullible fool who could never resist the charms of a beautiful woman who knew how to use her beauty to her advantage. How could he possibly resist her? She possessed everything he envisioned in the girl he would want to spend the rest of his life. "Shino. Hello. Are you there, bug boy?" a voice said, interrupting his thoughts. It was Kiba who had spoken. He reprimanded himself for losing touch with reality. Thinking of Hinata tended to make him do that. They were seated on one of the benches that were located in the stray dog shelter at the Inuzuka clan residence. The area was surrounded with cubicles that housed multiple dogs that had been rescued off the streets. It was close to noon. A half-full glass of lemonade was in his hand and it was beginning to get warm. Kiba's glass of lemonade had been empty for a while now. Akamaru was faithfully sitting by his partner's side. They had spent the last couple of hours tending to the needs of the homeless dogs in the shelter, talking and being idle. They had fed the dogs, changed the bandages of the injured dogs and administered medication to a few of them. Most of these dogs would be adopted by civilians, but some of them would be integrated into the clan. "I said it's almost time to meet up with Hinata," said Kiba. It was Tuesday that day. The second Tuesday of the month. They had an appointment to meet. "The way you were stuck in your own little universe reminds me of Sasuke. He always seems oblivious to his surroundings whenever I get the rare chance of seeing him," said Kiba. He was sharpening a kunai with a sharpening stone. "The only time that he did not seem to be stuck in his own little world was when we bumped into him and Naruto at Ichiraku Ramen a while back. I'm not sure how I should react to being compared to Sasuke," he said. "You know, I still don't trust him one bit even after all these months. I feel as if he might turn on us at a moment's notice and attack the village," said Kiba. "Why would he do that?" said Shino. "I don't know. Why are you asking me? He's the unstable traitor who joined up with Orochimaru." "Not me," said Kiba. He was currently staring at his reflection on the shiny kunai. "I would like to believe he has reformed. Don't you think he deserves to be given a second chance?" "People change, Kiba," he said. "Do people really change?" said Kiba. The question was uttered with such honesty that he knew that his canine-loving friend had not posed it for the sake of being argumentative. "All I'm just saying is that I don't trust him. I doubt I'll ever will. I don't trust him with Konoha and I certainly would never ever trust him with anyone I care about." Quote. "Never," Shino asked. Never, replied the Inuzuka. Enough about Sasuke. Let's go, he said, standing. They left the building and headed over to Kiba's house. The Inuzuka clan was inextricably linked with the concept of community. It was the reason that they lived in a shared residence like the Hyuga instead of having their respective homes scattered across Konoha. They deposited their empty glasses in the kitchen before leaving the clan compound. They traveled to the western part of Konoha. Western Konoha was the busiest section of Konoha. It was home to many thriving businesses of all kinds from restaurants, shinobi gear shops to clothing shops. It was the heart of Konoha's economy. It was not uncommon to come across foreigners in this area. The streets were constantly teeming with foreign visitors, travelers and locals. There was a constant lively buzz in the air. The elaborately decorated shop exteriors made the area a sight to behold. He spotted Hinata standing close to the flamboyant entrance of a traditional clothing shop. She was staring at the ground and seemed lost in her thoughts. She looked up as they drew nearer to her and flashed them a smile that seemed strained in his eyes. He failed to ignore how her long violet hair cascaded down her neck. Her peculiar lavender eyes were warm, like a mother's embrace. He wondered how her pale and yet radiant skin would feel under his palms and how the texture of her dark hair would feel between his fingers. He was glad that his heart could not speak, otherwise it would cause a scene. If it could, it would scream about how much he was infatuated with her. It would scream so loudly that all of the thousands of citizens in Konoha would hear. "Hey Kiba-kun," she said. Her voice was just loud enough that they could hear her in the business of the street but soft enough that it did not lose its mellowness. "Hey Shino-kun," she said to him with the same strained smile. He wondered what was to blame for her smile being so strained. He felt a dull ache when he thought about her hurting internally. Kiba greeted her with a feral grin on his face. Akamaru barked, begging to be acknowledged. She moved closer to him and patted him on the head. The canine groaned in delight. They departed for their destination with Kiba and Akamaru on his left and Hinata on his right. He kept getting the sense that something was bothering her. She noticed his staring and looked at him. He raised his eyebrow questioningly. She flashed him a smile and broke eye contact with him. What they were doing had become second nature. They would meet up with Hinata just after noon on every second Tuesday and proceed to Yakiniku-Q as a team. Yakiniku-Q was a Gyukaku-style restaurant. It had also been Asuma Sarutobi's favorite restaurant. Asuma had never failed to take his team there whenever there had been something worth celebrating. Team Asuma and Team Kurenai had begun gathering there for lunch soon after the war. They gathered every 2 weeks. Sometimes not all of them could make it. Shikamaru was the only who most often could not always make it. The Nara had often only joined them once a month on multiple instances. The reason for meeting at Asuma's favorite restaurant had been left unsaid. Maybe they did an attempt of preserving the memory of Asuma. Maybe they did it to preserve the bond that had formed between their teams after Asuma, Team 10 Feet's sensei and the father of Kurenai's daughter's untimely death. Although the reason had not been verbally established, they all knew there was a reason that compelled them to make an effort to regularly meet at Asuma's favorite restaurant. They passed Ichiraku Ramen on their way to Yakiniku-Q. He could almost feel Hinata's mood darken at the sight of the cozy establishment. He respected Naruto, despite that he held a grudge against him for hurting Hinata. He did not blame Naruto for not reciprocating Hinata's feelings, but the way he had handled the situation bothered him. The way he had not responded to her confession for months. The way he had given her false hope by dating her for a short period after the war and then breaking things off after telling her that he did not feel anything beyond platonic for her. It pained him to know how much the rejection had devastated Hinata. Why was she the one that always ended up being a victim of pain and misery? He wished he could shield her from all the pain. If holding her in his arms could shelter her from all the pain, he would hold her until his last feeble dying breath. It was funny how his thoughts often waxed poetic lately. From growing up in an abusive clan, to losing her mother at a tender age, to striving to prove herself to her clan and failing irregardless of her efforts, to losing Neji. Hinata had gone through tremendous hardships. Hardships he had never experienced. The greatest hardship he had gone through in his childhood had been that of the kids on the playground calling him strange because he loved insects. He had only one wish for Hinata, that she would find peace and happiness. Only those two things. He had a feeling she lacked in those aspects even though he did not know why. If he were Kiba he would say that his gut told him so. But he did not believe in gut feelings. What was intuition besides a collection of lifelong biases telling you how to interpret a situation? It was not some supernatural advisor meant to look out for you. Believing that intuition was nothing supernatural was simpler than the alternative. The matrix of simplicity that governed his life made him shy away from the concepts of divine intervention or the idea of there being a god or multiple gods. He would sacrifice almost anything to give Hinata peace and happiness. To see her free from whatever demons which held her down. He took another glance at her. The sun was sitting on her pale skin. Her hair almost seemed like it was glowing. He was awestruck by her beauty. The quiet violence of longing wounded his insides. They arrived at Yakiniku-Q and entered the establishment with Kiba leading the way. The restaurant was half full and the scent of barbecued meat was drifting in the air. The gleeful voices of the customers bounced around the establishment. He guessed that they were in high spirits because of the delicious food and the good company. The lady who owned the establishment waved at them from a distance. Kiba and Hinata waved back. He did not bother taking his hands out of the pockets of his jacket. He spotted Choji and Ino at their usual booth. Shikamaru was absent. Instead Sai, the dark-haired enigma, was seated next to Ino. Choji was seated opposite them. The meat was already cooking on the two circular griddles that were integrated into the wooden tables. The rebuilt Yakiniku-Q had sitting booths instead of zabatons surrounding the tables. Most buildings had been rebuilt with increasingly modern designs after Pain's devastating assault. Because it's not socially acceptable, Ino said exasperatedly as they sat down. Her arms were wailing above her head. Kiba slid in next to Choji and Hinata slid in next to Ino. Shino made sure to position himself next to Hinata. So it's acceptable for a guy to compliment a woman he's not romantically involved with on her character attributes, but it's inappropriate to compliment her on her physical attributes. Sai said with a puzzled expression. Yes, said Ino, but is it not still a compliment despite it being over her physique? Said Sai. It's not the same thing, replied Ino. How so? Said Sai, curiously. Sai was a mystery to him, but his loyalty was unquestionable, so Shino did not bother himself too much about the mystery that shrouded the pale-skinned artist. There had been a shift that had taken place within Sai in the aftermath of the war. He no longer forced emotions. The painfully fake smile was gone. The need to fake emotions was decreasing day by day. They were becoming increasingly genuine. Despite that, he was still unenlightened about the finer workings of society. Hey Hinata. Hi Shino, said Ino, having gave up on Sai. Kiba, she said as an afterthought. Why did you have to greet me last? Complained Kiba. Akamaru was sitting in the corner of the room. Here you go again making an issue out of nothing, sighed Ino. Ino and Kiba often squabbled. Despite that, the bantering was oddly not hostile. It was all in good fun, seemed to be the most appropriate saying to describe their perpetual arguing. Be sensible for once in your life, said Ino. Choji was turning the meat on the griddles. He was dressed in red pants and a white casual t-shirt. Ino was dressed in a knee-length black skirt and a purple sleeveless cropped top. Sai was curiously staring back and forth between Ino and Kiba. Shino glanced at Hinata. She was distractedly staring at the table and tracing circles on it with her index finger. What was bothering her? I know you love me just the way I am. Don't pretend like you don't have a crush on me, said Kiba. Hinata looked up. Choji looked away from the pamphlet he was reading and stared at Kiba. Sai seemed even more curious than before. Shino sighed. Outrage smothered Ino's features. Don't be ridiculous. You think. Why? What? Wait, what? Said Ino. The volume of her voice increased with every word until she was nearly shouting. So this is what a lover's quarrel looks like. Interesting, said Sai. He was stroking his chin in contemplation. Ino grew mortified. Choji burst out laughing. His eyes were squinted and his belly shook up and down as his laughter filled the room. A minuscule smile crossed Hinata's face. Kiba and Ino were engaged in a staring contest. Ino was mortified and Kiba had a satisfied smirk on his face. Mortifying Ino so much had probably fed his ego. The Inuzuka sent her a wink. Ino looked at him like she wanted his head delivered to her on a silver platter. Hey Ino, you didn't tell me you and Kiba had a thing going on, said Choji between bouts of laughter. Ino turned to Sai. She had somehow gotten a hold of a pair of metal tongs. I didn't invite you here for this. How could you even suggest such a thing? Ino shouted at Sai while pointing at him with a pair of metal tongs. Give him a break Ino. The guy is as socially oblivious as a 5-year-old, muttered a tired voice. I should be insulted that you're comparing me to a child, but what you said is true, Sai said disappointedly. Shikamaru, the 6th Hokage, Hinata's right-hand man, slid into the end of the booth next to Kiba. He was dressed in the standard Konoha shinobi uniform. There was a slight stench of tobacco that lingered on his breath. Shikamaru had soared up the ranks in a dramatically short period of time. He had gone from being an unmotivated chunin to being the Hokage's most trusted advisor and strategist. Many shinobi coveted to have such an influential position. It was unheard of for someone as young him to be in such a position. In terms of accomplishment among their peers, Shikamaru was an outlier. He stood alongside the likes of Naruto and Sakura. Shikamaru's right. Leave Sai alone. You're going to make Kiba jealous, said Shino. Choji burst into laughter. Don't encourage her. Now she's only going to be more troublesome, Shikamaru said. The Nara sighed as if the world was against him. Oh come on. Does everyone at this table hate me? Ino said dramatically. Hinata, tell me you're not playing along with this nonsense. Prove to me that one person here does not hate me, Ino cried desperately. Hinata smiled at Ino and placed her hand on Ino's own. Honestly, I think you and Kiba would be good together, said Hinata, delivering the final blow. Choji chuckled. Kiba blew out a kiss in Ino's direction. Shikamaru sighed and Sai just seemed lost. I'll pretend I didn't hear you say that to me, said Ino, removing her hand from Hinata's own. Shino noticed Shikamaru's unusual tiredness. The bags around his eyes were more pronounced than usual. The sixth has been working me like a slave for the past 2 days, Shikamaru said before yawning. That's what you get for committing to such a position, Kiba said to Shikamaru. Kiba, you only wish you could get such a high-ranking position, said Ino. You only wish you could have my babies. Name the time and place and I'll take you on an adventure you'll never forget, retorted Kiba. Whoa, relax man, what is wrong with you? Said Choji, cutting off Ino before she could respond to Kiba's crude words. Don't forget to prioritize your health, Shikamaru-kun. Your duties should come second to your well-being, Hinata said to Shikamaru. Trust me, I do prioritize my well-being. Another week of this and I'm quitting, said Shikamaru. Don't quit. You're finally doing something meaningful with that huge brain of yours. Don't waste your gift, said Ino. You don't have to sound like my mother, said Shikamaru. Ino sent him a glare. Go wash your hands. The food is almost ready, said Choji. Walking is such a drag sometimes, Shikamaru muttered on their way to the basin in the corner of the room. The grilled meat was ready after a few minutes. Hinata and Choji dished the meat and the sides for the table. Everyone was eating within seconds. Choji's salted beef tongue and Welsh onion was legendary among their peers. Team Kurenai, Team Asuma and Sai had spent half an hour talking after eating. They had went on ahead and paid for the food and said their goodbyes. The gathering had seemed to lift Hinata's spirits a bit. Choji had gone home. Shikamaru had departed to the Konoha archives. Ino had dragged Sai to who knows where and Kiba had headed east to run errands. That had left him alone with Hinata, to his pleasure. He had told her that he wanted to walk her home. She had smiled at him and thanked him. His heart had fluttered. Despite the fact that her mood had brightened, she still did not seem to be in the mood for conversation. Silence dominated as a result. He did not mind. Silent moments were part of life. Being alone with her like this would have to do for now. It was when they were halfway towards where she lived when the reclusive Uchiha appeared at a distance. The Uchiha's eyes were glued on the two of them. He thought nothing much of it but turned to Hinata so that he could comment about oddness of the way Sasuke was staring at them. Warning bells blasted in his mind when he noticed the look on her face. A shiver of concern ran down his back, almost as though someone had poured his back with ice-cold water. His fingers fidgeted anxiously. He knew that look on Hinata's face. He knew it well, and there was nothing good about it. When they had been younger, she would adopt the same expression when Naruto was paying attention to her. He had eventually associated the expression with flight, with the desire to escape. He was so familiar with her emotions that he noticed that fear was not the root of her desire to flee. No, he sensed no drop of fear from her. So why did she want to escape? He looked around the area and saw nothing out of the ordinary besides Sasuke. Could Sasuke possibly be the reason why she wanted to flee? If Sasuke was indeed to blame, what could possibly be the reason? She had never been afraid of Sasuke and he felt no fear coming from her, so why would she want to avoid him? He looked at her once more and was surprised to find that her expression had reverted to the way it had been before Sasuke's appearance. Nothing that remained suggested she wanted to flee. He observed her. She was casually looking ahead in Sasuke's direction. The Uchiha kept staring in their direction. His mind was almost convinced that Sasuke was the cause of her now hidden desire to flee. Sasuke's presence was the only factor that had not present before. It made no sense. Sasuke and Hinata did not interact as far as he knew. The Uchiha was as antisocial as they came. But then again there was a possibility that Sasuke and her could have interacted. Then maybe Sasuke could have said or done something to her. The full implications of that thought soon became apparent to him. Maybe Sasuke had hurt her. His blood froze. An awful pain seeped into his chest. If Sasuke had hurt Hinata in any way or form, he would make him pay. He stared at Hinata's calm expression. His mind was racing and thoughts of Sasuke hurting Hinata filled his mind. A sea of images of him hurting her flashed in his mind. A question burned his mind. Had Sasuke done anything to her? But why would he do anything of that nature to Hinata? The conversation he had had earlier with Kiba rang in his mind. Why would he do that? I don't know. Why are you asking me? He's the unstable traitor who joined up with Orochimaru. Not me. Simplicity was the matrix that governed his life. Facing off against Sasuke was not the simple thing to do in this situation. But he did not care. He would do it for Hinata. Simplicity be damned. His safety be damned. Everything be damned. Unstable traitor. Unstable traitor. Unstable traitor who joined up with Orochimaru. Unstable traitor. 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 Kiba's words kept repeating themselves in his mind. Do people really change? The more he entertained the thought of Sasuke hurting Hinata, the more probable it seemed. And the more his anger burned. He was not someone who was quick to anger. He was someone who was not easily moved to anger. Yes, he regularly felt feelings of frustration and annoyance, but he rarely became angry. When he did become enraged, his anger burned as hot as molten. It burned so hot that it threatened to melt his insides. At last the Uchiha was only a few feet away from them. Hinata, who was a few feet ahead of Shino, passed Sasuke without a single word. He was shocked that Hinata had passed one of their peers at such close proximity and not greeted him. That alone was a red flag. Hinata was always courteous. Always. It was inscribed into her DNA. Sasuke was now directly in front of him. One of them would have to step aside in order for the other to pass. Neither of them stepped aside. Sasuke probably too proud to be the one to give way and him feeling too rattled by the mere thought that Sasuke had hurt Hinata. They stood like that for a lengthy moment, eyes locked in silent battle. He had never been so unafraid of confronting the Uchiha before. At that moment he did not care that he stood no chance against the Uchiha. If it would come down to fighting him, then so be it. He would do it for Hinata's sake. There were a handful of moments in his life when he had felt such bravery. The bravery of willing to fight with reckless abandon or any concern for his life, to not care at all about the consequences of that course of action. To not give a damn about his extremely unfavorable odds of victory. "You've got something to say to me, bug boy," said Sasuke. Sasuke's voice had never sounded more arrogant and corrupt to his ears. He kept staring at the Uchiha, not backing down. He was going to ask him if he had done anything to Hinata. Right there and then in Hinata's presence. He was about to open his mouth to speak when a mellow voice interrupted him. "Shino-kun," Hinata said gently. She was standing a few feet behind the Uchiha. "What's wrong?" she asked curiously. "What's wrong?" That statement left him reeling. Had Sasuke's appearance not caused a negative reaction in her? Had the expression he had momentarily seen on her face been a figment of his imagination? Her words, so simple and plainly delivered, denied any knowledge of anything negative having transpired between Sasuke and her. Her statement made her seem clueless to why he was angry. Her words meant one of two things. 1. He had imagined the reaction she had shown towards Sasuke. Or 2. She was capable of great deceitfulness. He was accusing Sasuke purely on assumption. Assumptions were sometimes right, but still, they were assumptions nonetheless. He took one more look at Sasuke and stepped aside to let him pass. The Uchiha threw one last glance at him and tossed a glance at Hinata before continuing on his way. Shino walked up to Hinata. "What are we waiting for?" he said. They too continued on their way. They reached the street where Hinata lived after about 15 minutes of leisurely walking. He stopped walking and Hinata followed suit. A spark of bravery ignited within him. He moved closer to Hinata and wrapped his arms around her shoulders and upper back. She responded by loosely wrapping her arms around his torso. It was a platonic hug. He rarely gave her such hugs. It was more of Kiba's style. "You look like you need a hug," he said. His chin was resting on her head. She tightened her arms around him. The feeling of her warm body against his own and her scent flooding his senses was intoxicating. "Thank you. Why is that you're almost always able to see right through me?" said Hinata. "Even when I'm smiling you are able to tell if something is bothering me." Quote. They separated. He took a step backwards. "Kiba calls it a supernatural gut feeling," he said. She smiled a bit. "And what do you call it, Shino-kun?" said Hinata. "I'll get back to you about that," he said. Hinata's smile widened. "I assume you call it science. It's simpler that way, isn't it?" she said. He smirked. She was smiling that smile of hers. The one that made his heartbeat quicken. He suddenly felt the urge to tell her that he loved her. He wanted to tell her that he saw her face in his sleep. That he heard her voice whispering to him in his daydreams. He wanted to tell her that he had never felt this way for any other girl. He felt his palms moistening as she stood there looking at him with her large beautiful lavender eyes. The eyes that were filled with so much kindness and compassion. He wanted to hold her hands. Those hands that were full of healing. To feel her delicate fingers intertwining with his. He wanted to touch her face. He wanted to embrace her. To hold her and never let go. She was the only girl he wanted. The only one that understood him. "Kiba and I are here for you if you need us," he said to her. "Don't worry about me," said Hinata. "There's just a tiny issue that's been stressing me lately, but it's nothing major. I'll resolve it soon." Quote. His heart urged him to ask about Sasuke. To ask her if the tension he had felt back there was real or if it was a phantom of his imagination. He wanted to ask if the aloof Uchiha had done anything to her. If he had hurt her in any way. But he didn't because he did not want to risk ruining the moment. "Bye Hinata," he said. "Bye Shino-kun," she said smiling. She turned around and walked away. She stopped after a few steps before turning around to face his direction. "And thank you. Thank you for always being there for me," said Hinata. "What are friends for?" he replied. She smiled, waved at him and walked away. He watched her as she walked away. He watched her until she disappeared into her apartment building. His mind went back to the situation with Sasuke. He had lost himself in the midst of the moment. He had lost all rational thought. Was that the effect Hinata had on him now? He would be lying if he said that did not frighten him. Who knew what he would be capable of if he allowed his emotions to rule over him? He needed to blow off some steam and so he sprinted home. He would eventually tell Hinata that he loved her. Just not now. The time was not yet right.